Dr. Gundry, it's just so good to see you here. And I've read many of your books. I'm super excited about this one. And I'm always curious about, anytime we go down the rabbit hole of researching more than anything, case studies, looking at all the things and deciding, okay, I need to write a book on this. I need to connect the dots between the brain and the gut and what we can do to support people at the microbiome level to sharpen our mind, to feel more alert, and honestly, to support mental health. And so I was curious for you in your journey, like what was the impetus for this? Why were you feeling so motivated to write this book today?
Well, my current book, my last book was called Gut Check, and it was in a way Plant Paradox 2.0. The Plant Paradox came out in 2017, so I wrote it in 2015, 16. And, it became a monster bestseller, blah, blah, blah. And 10 years on, I still see patients 6 days a week. I see them even on Saturdays and Sundays. And I learned a lot in those 10 years. The Human Microbiome Project, for instance, was just completed in 2017. And so we've known about the gut-brain axis for a number of years.
Mhm.
And what's interesting is initially, when all these neurons were discovered down in the gut, there were more neurons sitting in the gut than there were in the spinal cord. And everybody said, what the heck? What are those guys doing down there? And so they're sending hormones to the brain. They're making hormones. And so that they're the second brain, right? Well, okay, that's good enough. But then when the microbiome really was mapped and discovered, it was son of a gun. Those neurons down in the gut, they aren't actually making all these compounds. It's the gut microbiome that turns out is making all these compounds. And we ought to be, now that we know they're there, maybe we ought to figure out what these guys are doing. So we now have, the microbiome gut brain connection. And all I can say is Hippocrates 2,500 years ago said all disease begins in the gut. And I guess I'm just a slow learner. Most of us, I guess, are slow learners. And the more I see patients, and I see them 6 days a week and change their eating patterns and measure their leaky gut and measure the gut microbiome and whether there's good guys down there, whether there's bad guys down there, the more I'm impressed that Hippocrates was right. And so most of the things that I think we all took for granted as normal, like mommy brain, for instance, like when I first met a lot of my female patients, they were on one or two antidepressants. And one of the most famous lines I ever heard, I used to, mo- most of my first patients were men with coronary artery disease or diabetes, and their wife would bring them in for me to fix them,
Absolutely.
right?
That sounds about right.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And so I view this as a team sport. So I would ask the wife to also join in. And so we'd be taking her history and physical, and invariably, a lot of them were on antidepressants. And I go, well, what are you doing on antidepressants? And one of the most famous lines was, if you were married to my husband, you'd be on antidepressants. I had to throw that in. It was actually a true line. But
I believe that.
it was so common that I began, and most of my patients now see me for autoimmune diseases or for mental health issues, quite frankly. I have a practice in addiction, etc. And one of the first things I noticed with them participating in whatever we were going to do is, and these women had often tried to wean themselves off of antidepressants. And some would stop cold turkey, which is not a good idea in the most cases, but they couldn't stay off of them. And with this program, and I write about it in the book, all of a sudden, and it may take 6 months, may take 9 months, they go, you're not going to believe this, but, I stopped the antidepressants. Please don't get mad at me. I'm going, I'm not mad at you. I would think that that's what should happen if we're doing this right. And the other thing that they invariably say is, you won't believe how this fog is cleared from my brain. I just thought it was me, or I thought it was maybe the antidepressants, but my goodness, my mommy brain's gone, and my thinking is so much better. And so when I finished gut check, I said, let's talk about this part of how the microbiome is just intimately involved with every part of our brain, our behavior. One of the things that I guess shocked me is your personality is determined by your microbiome, kind of from day one. And that actually explains, I have two lovely daughters, and they basically have same genetics, but they are just wildly polar opposites in behavior. And they came out of the box that way. And some of the research shows that it's literally the mother's microbiome, both in utero, that instructs neurons in the fetus, and it's the mother's microbiome, or lack thereof, that sets the foundation for this continued communication. I feel a lot better now with that, because that
You're like,
explains.
obviously, the microbiome for one wasn't the same as the other. And actually, that leads me to a question I'm very curious about. I always say I take care of everybody by taking care of women. And I have a lot of women who come to me who are, ready to get ready for conception. And I always tell both women and men, at least 90 days, kind of clean things up. Let's get the microbiome in, really thriving. And so I'd love to have you, if this is something you advise as well, kind of walk us through. I remember interviewing, Dr. Mark Hyman and Dr. Perlmutter about this, about metabolic health in children. And, when is the time to really focus on that? And both answers were in utero, which the child is not involved in that process. I mean, they are because they're growing, but really aren't making those decisions themselves. And recognizing, I remember growing up in the 80s and the 90s, even as of recent, always being told that when you were pregnant, you could kind of eat whatever you wanted. You can kind of do whatever you want. Like, you're growing eyeballs, you're growing neurons at millions per minute, but it became very clear in my own practice that that was not true. And so I would love if you had a second, what should we be thinking about if we were thinking about getting pregnant, conceiving, and we really wanted to ensure that our microbiome was as robust? I know for me, I knew there was a deep connection between the microbiome and my brain, my child's brain development. And so, I spent 6 months cleaning. I just really wanted to make sure it was as robust and as squeaky clean as possible. And then was really mindful about what I ate every single day while I was pregnant. And then even throughout breastfeeding too. Like I have an autoimmune condition like so many women. So I was on an API protocol almost the entire time with a lot of gut loving foods. And so I know that that's a little bit more on the extreme side, but I was not playing. And so I was just curious, Dr. Gundry, what are your thoughts there?
Well, it's true. I do take care of women and men who are having trouble getting pregnant, number one. And invariably, either or both of the parents have leaky gut. Interestingly, I think maybe it probably wouldn't surprise you, but there's now a very strong link between leaky gut and endometriosis.
I'm so convinced of that. And that
And
endometriosis is more of an autoimmune condition than, driven by gut issues than
yeah,
anything else.
and so are fibroids, and
Mhm.
it actually shocks men that their big prostate is actually driven by leaky gut and LPSs. And
Yeah.
I used to have a big prostate, and now I don't have a big prostate. And they go, what are you talking about? You had a big prostate, and now you
You
don't?
shrunk? How did you shrink it? Yeah.
Well, yeah, how'd you do that? And
Well, and Dr. Gundry, a quick clarifying question. How many of us do you think have a leaky gut? Because obviously inflammation and, gut permeability is a spectrum. And it based on the research I've looked at, it's many of us.
yeah, now perhaps I have a skewed population, but I made the bold statement in the plant paradox that if you have a complaint then you have leaky gut. And from headaches to mood disorders to metabolic syndrome, like we just talked about, endometriosis. I personally think that coronary artery disease is driven by leaky gut. I believe it's an autoimmune condition, and there's more and more evidence that is true as well. So getting back to your question, when we look at these people, they almost invariably have leaky gut. Most patients in my practice have leaky gut. It's not pseudoscience. We can measure it. We have to, if you want to call it intestinal permeability, that's fine.
I just, it's so funny. I always, like you said, measuring it. So I always think of a gradient. I think of inflammation in the same way. Like there's
Oh,
always
yeah.
kind of a gradient of inflammation.
Well, and again, I think like Hippocrates was right, all disease begins in the gut. And I think inflammation is merely a manifestation of leaky gut because people say, well, we got to quiet the inflammation and we got to eat anti-inflammatory foods. Well, I'm in California and we have lots of interesting fires, obviously, and eating anti-inflammatory foods to quell inflammation is like fighting one of our fires with a garden hose. And it's just, that's not where it's coming from. What you have to do to stop inflammation is stop leaky gut and turn off 80% of our white blood cells line the gut. And they're sending out the signal, among other places, to our brain that we're under attack and, save your cells, get out of the water. And so a lot of these people, particularly women who can't conceive, we see their leaky gut, and the next thing we know, hey, guess what? I'm pregnant. Or we have a few women who have a vaginal microbiome that is just lethal to their husband's sperm. And so we've got to change their vaginal microbiome to be welcoming.
More receptive. Yeah.
Yeah.
And more so too, I was thinking of a preventative, I know not everyone's going to go and get their leaky gut tested.
No, you don't have
Unfortunately.
to, quite frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, I feel like it's always a great preventative. And even not so much, I was thinking fertility or conception, but ultimately just child development
Right.
was the thing. How do we check all the boxes to ensure, as you're talking about neural, like brain growth and neuron growth, that we're setting our children's microbiome up for success out the gate?
Right. I attend the Society of Microbiota meeting and usually lecture there every year. And it's interesting now that we can do genetic profiling of all these bacterial species and we don't have to grow them. We know certainly that the placenta has a microbiome. There's an argument that was made at this last meeting that just because we can read bacterial signatures in the brain of a fetus or in the amniotic fluid doesn't prove that, in fact, those are living bacteria in there. So there's a bit of intellectual argument, but we know that we can measure bacteria in people's blood, human blood now. We know that we can measure bacteria in human brain now. Certainly in animal studies we can. So at the very least, we know that bacteria, at least in the placenta, let's put it that way, have a big part in instructing the immune system of the developing fetus before birth. And a big part, and I talk about this in the book, of encouraging interneuron connections and establishing these first connections, this, incredible neural network. And that if you've got the right population of bacteria, and again, this is mostly animal studies, that you will get a more robust, intelligent mouse or rat than if you have a dysbiotic placenta. Where does that dysbiotic or good placenta population come from? Well, sadly, it's from the mother's microbiome. And so getting back to your question, the healthier the mother during pregnancy can make her microbiome, it's virtually an assurance that she's doing everything she can to make the placental microbiome and the communication between her baby's neurons better and better.
Mm.
And then it gets more important than that. We know that, the first 1 year, maybe 2 years is by far the most important. We know that mothers who are given antibiotics, even at childbirth, unfortunately, their children's brains do not develop as well as if they hadn't been given antibiotics. We know that mothers, of course, who breastfeed, who haven't been given antibiotics, have their child has a much more rich, diverse microbiome, because who would have guessed that your breast milk is full of bacteria and your breast milk is full of polysaccharides to not feed the baby, but feed the other babies, the microbiome? I mean, who would have guessed that any of this was actually happening? And yet we know that these kids who get the benefit, for instance, of a vaginal birth, that get the benefit of not getting antibiotics or the mother not getting antibiotics, do much better. And there's all sorts of other fun stuff. If we can keep kids away from antibiotics as much as possible during their first 1 to 2 years of life, makes a huge difference. And then finally, the more we know for a long time, the more phospholipids and long chain omega-3 fats that are in the mom's diet, the bigger their baby's brain, the better they do in school, the less processed and ultra processed food the mother eats, and certainly the baby is given, the better. And these are things that are manipulable by just about anyone. And we all want our kids to be smart and do great and not have personality issues.
Yeah, and yet we live at a time where that we see more neurodivergence than ever before. But I'm so glad that you brought to that attention that critical. I always think of the critical, like definitely 2 years, but definitely even 3 years. I think about my son being. Later in life he'll hear this. He's 4. He's a little super pooper. I breastfed for 2.5 years. I was so mindful of what I ate. Not only did I take omegas, but I ate a lot of salmon, a lot of omega rich foods. We're having salmon tonight for dinner. And my son loves, or he calls it orange fish. And we're having broccoli, and we're just having, we're just very robust blueberries for dessert. But always being so mindful. It's raining here, and I'm sure I don't know if you're in Southern California, but it's raining here in San Diego. And
yeah, I'm in Santa Barbara, so it's
okay, yeah.
pouring here.
I love Santa Barbara. He goes to an outdoor preschool. So he's out in the mud playing just trying to be out in nature, and all these things that I think about facilitating. It's always, we call it tummy friends, his tummy friends. And, how can we facilitate those? And that's very much a conversation we have every single day. And so, obviously a lot of my audience is women who want to support their own brain and their own mental health. But I know that all of them are very mindful, just like myself, about how do we support our children as they're developing, when it's still at a time, especially if we've got young kids, where we have a lot of control over what that's going to look like. And the epicenter of all of that is the microbiome.
Yeah, it really is. In fact, in the book, we can identify species of microbiome that will make a young kid outgoing. And if you don't have those, you will be shy and not outgoing. And it's actually species of bacteria that correlate with this. And it's just amazing.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. And we know that there's anxious bacteria, there are depressive bacteria. And the fun thing is, you can actually, the book is, well, you can manipulate those guys. You can drive the bad guys out by giving the good guys what they need to crowd out the bad guys. And as unfortunately we know in the United States, the bad guys in our gut are pretty much in control. But the reason I write these books is, guess what? You can help the good guys, the gut buddies, as I call them, gain advantage.
I love that. I want to get into how we can support the good, yeah, the good, your good tummy friends, your good gut friends. But particularly, I'd love to know, because I am very much in the camp of many of us, if not all of us, have some level of leaky gut. That is where, if you're an adult living in this modern day world, if you were, again, if you have any pain or some type of even what it considered to be the daily pain points of everyday life type of symptoms, whether that's low stress tolerance, mood swings, foggy brain, like I deeply think it's connected to the gut. But are there some big offenders? Like if this is going on in your life or in your body, it's a full body, most likely that's what's happening, whether that's over the counter medications or it is just bombarded with toxins, like you just haven't done haven't removed a lot of that stuff from your life in your house. Maybe it's excess plastics in the environment. What would you say are some of the big offenders that we should, obviously ultra processed foods, huge offender?
Right. I think one of the big, not surprises anymore, but glyphosate Roundup
Yeah.
was introduced in the mid 1970s. Interestingly enough, along with broad spectrum antibiotics, and also at the same time, proton pump inhibitors, antacids, if
Yeah.
you will.
Yeah.
And also NSAIDs, things like ibuprofen, Aleve, naproxen. And I've got a big chapter in the book how something as innocent as ibuprofen is one of the best ways to disrupt your gut that anyone has ever developed. In fact, when these were introduced in the mid 70s, you could only prescribe an NSAID like ibuprofen for 2 weeks. And it was a prescription because the drug companies knew that these were really good at producing leaky gut. And so the FDA said, yeah, okay, we'll allow you to use these for 2 weeks and then you can't use them ever again. Now, of course, they're the number one over-the-counter medicine there is. And as they show in the book, they were designed by drug companies to cause leaky gut. They knew this in the 70s. When you have leaky gut, you get pain as a signal from your immune system that you're basically under attack. You take an ibuprofen and it relieves the pain, but it produces leaky gut more. And so you actually enter a vicious cycle where it takes more and more to dull the pain. And so you're hooked. Then you can graduate to the next level up. And we can also identify that there are bacteria that are associated with NSAID use. And these guys cause even more leaky gut. So that's a biggie. And we have children's Advil, for goodness
I
sakes.
know. We have children. I mean, I grew up on children's Tylenol. It was orange flavored, which means it was orange dye or yellow and red dye,
Right. Yeah,
you know?
exactly. So that's number one. Number two, I think the biggest offender that I see all the time now is glyphosate, is Roundup. Because Roundup, actually, it was patented as an antibiotic. It was not patented as a weed killer. And the glyphosate, number one, is really good at causing leaky gut all by itself. Number two, glyphosate actually targets the tryptophan producing pathway bacteria. But glyphosate won't kill off the bad guys. They're quite resistant to it. So you get an overgrowth of the bad guys and you stop making the tryptophan pathway bacteria. So it's no wonder that anxiety and depression is at all-time highs, regardless of social media causing it. So what's so interesting to me working in autoimmune disease is that we've got a 94% success rate of putting an autoimmune disease in remission in a year. Published data. Leaky gut is sealed. Every human being with autoimmune disease has leaky gut, and I happen to think it's the cause of the autoimmune disease. Anyhow, so I'll take a patient with Hashimoto's, or let's use a really blatant example like psoriasis, and we get them off of their meds, and they don't have psoriasis, and they go over to Europe and France or Italy, and they can't help themselves. They have a croissant, which, I've forbidden, and they have baguettes, and they have pizzas, and they don't react. They don't flare. And they go, oh, Dr. Gundry's cured me. I can have all these things. Yay. And they come back to the United States, and they eat our baguette or, our croissant or our pizza. And within 2 weeks, they're calling me on the phone going, my psoriasis is back. I thought you cured me. I said, what? You actually were not eating glyphosate over there. And now you're back eating glyphosate, and that's exactly what happened. So glyphosate is
It's insidious.
it's everywhere.
It's everywhere. I was going to say, well, how do we, everything's organic, no refined grains in my house. And I still know crunchy farmers market up the street. I live in Encinitas, California, kind of similar energy as Santa Barbara. And I know that no matter how hard I try, we're still going to be exposed.
Right.
It's impossible to escape at this point.
Yeah, most California wines test positive.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it's a full body no.
Most organic oats test positive for glyphosate because it's sprayed in the air.
It's sprayed. Yeah.
It's
There's
sprayed
no wall. It's like the restaurant when you had the non-smoker section versus the smoking section.
We should have learned. Yeah, we should have known that. Yeah, so it's a huge problem, and I don't think there's any way around it at the moment. Some of the European countries have pretty strong bans against glyphosate, but now Bayer owns Monsanto, and Bayer is a major contributor to the EU Parliament. So I hope it's not just a matter of time before. The other problem is that glyphosate, most of the plants have developed resistance against glyphosate. So the answer, of course, is to use twice as much. And so glyphosate use keeps going up. And the other thing people need to know, we used to think of, non-GMO, good, because it won't be sprayed with glyphosate. Now, almost all of our conventional crops are sprayed with glyphosate as a desiccant to kill them so they are easily harvested. A dry, dead plant is much more easily harvested than a wet plant, and money is everything. So all our wheat is sprayed with glyphosate. All of our corn is sprayed with glyphosate. All of our oats are sprayed with glyphosate, and so on. Soybeans are sprayed with it. And not only, so we then feed those crops to our animals. Mm-hmm. And that glyphosate is now in their meat. Not to mention it's fed to us in all the processed foods we eat. So it's a double whammy of glyphosate.
We work really hard, but that level of discipline. Not a lot. It's hard. That intentionality, that level of being intentional.
Well, I'll give you, and I've written about this, I'll give you a personal example. Years ago, when we started our autoimmune practice, we all did autoimmune tests on ourselves. And my administrator comes running in and she says, "Doc, you have lupus." And I go, "I don't have lupus." And she says, "Yeah, you do. You've got a positive anti-nuclear antibody." And I go, that's interesting. That's interesting because I'm always experimenting with food. And my father's side of the family had horrible psoriasis. My dad was on methotrexate for 51 years, and my aunt same way. And I'm going, well, there is a family history piece to autoimmune disease. Not much, but there is. And I said, I think I'll turn it off. So I was perfect for 3 weeks. And we retested, and my ANA was negative. I go, okay, that's good. So I was editing one of my bestsellers, The Longevity Paradox, in New York a few years ago on a Friday. And we didn't finish in time. And I said, well, what the heck? I'll stay the weekend and we'll finish editing on Monday. So I had a weekend to kill. My wife wasn't with me. So I said, I wonder if I can reactivate my autoimmune marker. So I cheated. I had bread. I had tomatoes with peels and seeds. I had pizza. What else did I have? I had beans. And I had, I think, an ear of corn. And I come back to California and I test my ANA and it's positive. In fact, it's higher than it was.
It was before, yeah.
And I went, well, that's cool. So I said, I wonder how fast I can turn it off. So I decided I'd test my blood every week. So in I was perfect. In 1 week, it was negative. So what does that teach me? Number one, that I can create leaky gut by cheating for a weekend. Number two, the good news for me is that I've got a pretty robust microbiome. I've got a pretty robust wall of my gut. And the repair process will only take a week to repair. That's not like most people. It takes most of my patients 9 months to a year to repair their leaky gut. So the good news is even I can cause leaky gut. I got to work at it to do it. But the good news is it is repairable. And the better we get our microbiome, and the more we fortify the wall of our gut, because there always will be intrusions,
Mm-hmm.
the faster it can repair. And I go through the book. How do we do that? Well, we got to have a really high vitamin D level. Number,
Which is so rare.
so rare.
It's so rare. I would say 9 out of 10 labs I look at every day, it is below normal.
Yeah. 80% of my
Yeah.
practice in Palm Springs and Santa Barbara of Southern Californians are low.
Mm-hmm.
And vitamin D is absolutely essential to activate stem cells that line the wall of our gut to differentiate into epithelial cells. And without vitamin D, they just literally sit there and twiddle their thumbs and go, well, what do you want me to do?
Mm-hmm.
So vitamin D is really essential in that standpoint. The second thing is, we probably get into this, we have to move beyond just realizing that, well, fiber, particularly soluble fiber, is what our gut buddies want to eat. And the more soluble fiber we eat, the better we are. Well, the Sonnenbergs, the husband and wife microbiology team at Stanford, who are doomsayers in terms, and I respect them a great deal. They think all of us, we have a desert wasteland for a microbiome instead of a tropical rainforest. And they're right. Most of us here do. But they did a great experiment giving healthy volunteers a large amount of inulin. And inulin's a really good prebiotic fiber.
Mm-hmm.
It's present in chicory, it's present in asparagus, artichoke hearts. It's actually easy to obtain. Radicchio is a great source.
Yeah.
So they gave them a bunch of prebiotic inulin, and they looked at their microbiome diversity, and a more diverse microbiome, the better. And they looked at their inflammatory markers. And lo and behold, nothing changed. The gut microbiome didn't get more diverse, and the inflammatory markers didn't get any better. And I go, well, shoot, now what? So they said, let's do the same experiment, but this time give them fermented foods. And primarily they gave them yogurts and kefirs. Now, this time, the gut microbiome got much more diverse and the inflammatory markers went down. And I wrote about this in Gut Check, my last book. What we now know is, let's say the holy grail of postbiotics, the products of bacterial fermentation, is butyrate. Let's just choose butyrate for one.
Mm-hmm.
We now know that there are butyrate-producing bacteria, and Akkermansia muciniphila is one of my favorites. But there's a assembly line of bacteria that bacteria 1 needs something to eat to produce a product that bacteria 2 needs to eat to produce the product that bacteria 3 needs to eat, and so on and so forth, until you get to what the butyrate-producing bacteria needs to eat. And if you're missing one of those guys, or if you're missing a product that one of those guys need, the whole thing won't work. Just exactly what they found. So these people were not eating probiotics. They were eating postbiotics, the products of fermentation. And so you really have to have at least this 1-2 punch. You've got to have fermentable fiber, and you've got to have these postbiotics like short chain fatty acids, just to use one. And the great news is fermented foods is full of them. And vinegar happens to be a fermented food. And acetic acid is the acid in most vinegars, is one of the most essential precursors for making butyrate that none of us knew about. So those are a couple of easy things to do.
So fermented foods. And I'm typically recommending 5 to 6 servings a day. Is that along the lines of your research? And I do still love fiber. I always think it's a yes and, a little bit, some fiber and fermented foods.
Yeah, well, and luckily a lot of fermented foods like
Are fibrous.
yeah, like sauerkraut or
Mm-hmm.
kimchi. I have a lot of my patients though have an aversion to fermented foods. And that's because our culture is sour averse. And it's really like, let's take kombucha. Great fermented food, but most people really do not like the flavor of kombucha. And if you just check out your health food store shelves, you'll notice the amount of added sugar in most of the kombuchas is hilariously high or dangerously high
Dangerously high. Yeah.
because they're trying to get people to buy their product. So I find low sugar kombuchas, they exist.
They do.
There are some low sugar kefirs. There's some water kefirs that are really easy to obtain. They're low sugar. And again, vinegars. I believe it or not, I invented the fake Coke that was on TikTok. The balsamic vinegar and San Pellegrino. I have a YouTube from like 10 years ago. Yeah, I was the inventor of the fake Coke. And so that's an easy way. And
It is an easy way. I was thinking about salads with
salad
really
with
amazing
vinegar
olive oil and
and
vinegar.
vinegar.
Yeah.
It's easy.
Mhm.
So there's all sorts of ways to get less than appealing fermented foods into your diet. And goat and sheep yogurts that are unflavored are a fantastic way of doing it. And I like people to put inulin in their unflavored yogurts. Inulin is a prebiotic fiber. And that's really exciting research that it's a great prebiotic fiber. Allulose, sorry, not inulin.
Oh,
Allulose
allulose. Yeah.
is a great
Yeah.
prebiotic fiber.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Love that. And so food wise, obviously, I think a lot of people are going to love that there's a lot we can do, things to get rid of, things to bring in into our diet. Vitamin D, supplementing that, obviously. Any other supplementation that we should be considering? Let's say we definitely know we've got leaky gut issues and having a deep understanding is going to take us a minute to clean it up. Are there any supplements that you feel can help move the needle?
Well, I'll blatantly toot my own horn. My biggest selling product at Gundry MD is BioComplete 3, which are prebiotics, probiotics, and nano encapsulated butyrate. And the reason it's my number one selling product by far is that it works. You got to deliver butyrate down to the colon. And you could swallow all the butyrate in the world and it will never get down to the colon where it belongs. I've had the pleasure of having Colleen Cutliff from Pendulum Life on my podcast a number of times. And Colleen makes Akkermansia muciniphila, the human strain, and sells it. And I'm a big fan. But she likens it to, let's suppose you have $1 million in a suitcase in the trunk of your car and you're taking it to the bank for deposit. And you get in an accident on the 405 freeway and you get rear-ended and the trunk springs open and the suitcase falls out and it pops open and $1 million bills are spread across the highway. And people are grabbing it and everybody gets maybe $10 worth, but none of it gets to the bank where it belongs. And it didn't do you any good and it didn't do most people any good because it was dispersed.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be delivered where
It needs to be
needs to be.
delivered. Yeah.
And what most people are shocked, even most gastroenterologists are shocked, that the colonocytes, the cells that line our colon, 80% of their nourishment comes from butyrate. That's it. 80%. It's not from blood flow. It's not from amino acids. It's butyrate. And it's got to be produced or delivered in the colon. And when we look at the gut microbiome of a great number of my patients, they don't make any butyrate, and most of them don't have any butyrate producing bacteria in the first place. So the reason BioComplete 3 works is that you can deliver butyrate where it needs to go. And people, for instance, why in the world are we having this epidemic of cancer, colon cancer in 30-year-olds or in 40-year-olds? The answer is no, we don't need to do colonoscopies in 35-year-olds. The answer is the reason we're getting that is that number one, colon cells have to have butyrate. If they don't have butyrate, they get dysplastic, they get hangry. And butyrate is actually one of the best compounds to stop cancer cells division that anybody's ever heard of. So to me, it's like, well, of course we've got colon cancer in 35-year-olds because they've been devoid of butyrate all their lives. And what did you expect?
Yeah. Yeah. And well, it's colonoscopies that we're ordering right now.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
It's
what
like,
we're
no,
doing.
no, no.
That's the standard of care right now, Dr.
Oh, I know. It's like,
Gosh forbid you talk about the microbiome with your primary doctor.
oh gosh, yeah.
That's just a
Well,
waste of your time.
yeah, well, and you probably had Mark Hyman on the podcast. Mark has a daughter who's a third-year medical student in a prestigious medical school. We won't mention it. Even in her third year, she has yet to have a course on the microbiome. Yet.
Yeah, I mean, now she's pretty much done at this point.
Yeah, she's done.
Yeah, I was going to say
now she's in
residency. Yeah,
yeah,
schools and then residency, and that's
so it's like, wait a minute, and it's just a very nice medical school, and if they're not getting taught. I was on a podcast where a cardiologist, we were talking about this. He said, oh, I beg to differ. The gastroenterologists believe the microbiome has nothing to do with anything. I'm going, what the heck? What planet are you living on? But they don't know.
They don't know. It's not, they're definitely not getting it in continuing education.
No, because
based on your specialty. Yeah.
And all continuing medical education is done by big pharma.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no big pharma interested in the microbiome. They'd like to make you on a GLP-1 agonist for the rest of your life, which if you had the right microbiome, you would be producing GLP-1.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Oops.
So I know we went over some really profound nutrition type of supplementation that we can bring in. Is there any type of lifestyle that we should be mindful of when it comes to supporting our overall gut microbiome? What does our microbiome love in terms of lifestyle? Is it being outside in nature? Is it good sleep?
Well, yeah. One thing I tell everybody who will listen is get yourself a dog. Dogs make you go out twice a day, whether you want to or not. In fact, I went out in the rain this morning with my dogs because I had to. And they bring back the forest bathing. They bring it back on their paws. Let your dog lick your face. This is one of the best things that you can do to enhance the diversity of your microbiome. That's number one. We know that exercise improves the diversity of the microbiome. There are very good papers showing that yoga improves the diversity of the microbiome. Meditation improves the diversity of the microbiome. So all of those practices are useful. The main I was a professor at Loma Linda for many years, which is the only blue zone in the United States.
Yeah.
And
Loma Linda, not too far from both of us.
Yeah, I know, nearby. Loma Linda means beautiful hill in Spanish. And all of these blue zones live in hilly communities. And just walking against gravity is one of the best things you can do. So
agreed.
Those are things.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. All right, and the book is coming out today as this is getting released. And
April 15th, tax day.
Tax day.
So take your refund and go buy the book.
Exactly. Stephen, is there anywhere you want? Is there any? Obviously, I'm going to put all the links to Amazon and everywhere books are sold. Anything else you would love? Anywhere you want to point us for you to check you out, to learn more? I'm sure you've got support around this book in terms of other bonuses and goodies, anything like that.
Yeah, all the goodies. We're actually also going to come out with my next PBS special on the gut-brain paradox, and that'll be out actually this fall. We're just recording it now. Come to GundryMD.com, my food and supplement company. Come to GundryHealth.com, which is my new telemedicine service where we actually, with finger pricks, can look at your food sensitivities and the amount of leaky gut that you have, and will help you traverse this minefield that has been thrown at us. And drgundry.com, my regular website. 2 YouTube channels, Instagram, Facebook, the Dr. Gundry podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yes, I know. I'm actually right after this meeting with a patient about their gut microbiome. It's literally what we're going over. And and so I thought the timing of this conversation was so perfect. But yeah, I'm so grateful for you doing the good work in the world and really just educating us to the awareness around this very kind of epidemic that we're experiencing in terms of our health.
Yeah, and unfortunately, nobody's going to fix this for us from afar. Big food, big pharma, big government.
Yeah.
We all have to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
And the good news is it's fixable.
Yes.
It takes work, but it's fixable.
That's what we started with earlier today. Yeah, I always think, and in a very gentle and beautiful way, I'm always like, no one's coming to save you. Like, no one's going to be making sure that you are eating your fermented foods. No one's going to make sure that you're taking the supplements, your vitamin D, and particularly the moms and the women listening, it's your responsibility to take care of the people in the household to make sure that they're doing their thing. And so if there's anyone who's not getting saved, it is definitely my demographic, because it's on
That's
them to
right.
take care of their people.
Yeah, that's right. Everybody's, again, I have 2 daughters and a wife, and you got women rule. I mean, and you guys, you've always had a gut sense, and we should honor that and listen to you.
It's true. Probably that is the mic drop comment today. Thank you so much, Dr. Gundry. It's such a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for watching. Now, if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you are ready to learn more about perimenopause and how to navigate with a lot of ease and grace, be sure to subscribe to this channel so that you can join our community. Don't forget to share this video with someone that you love, that you know is navigating the perimenopause journey as well, because they deserve to feel their best too. See you in the next video.